Everyone, thanks very much for being here today, and I'm glad that we can get you onto your flight home in time, so thank you for being patient. I'm interested in your research evaluating the 2012 family violence amendments, and I've had a chance to have a brief look at the findings in your synthesis report, which is very comprehensive, so well done to you on that piece of work. In relation to the legislative changes and their impact on parenting arrangements after separation, can you give me, please, an overview of your findings and whether they're achieving the objective of keeping children safe and victims of domestic violence safe?
Anne Hollins, Director of the Institute of Family Studies. Thank you, Senator, for your question. The evaluation covered a lot of complex areas, so you're specifically wanting to know about the parenting, the residence arrangements of the children as a result of the...
I'm particularly interested in the effects of section 60, capital C, 2, capital A, which places a greater emphasis on the child's right to be safe than it does on the access to meaningful interaction with both parents. So, arrangements after separation in terms of living arrangements and any other arrangements that pertain to that.
So I'll refer to Associate Professor Darryl Higgins for some specific details on that question.
Thank you.
Darryl Higgins, Deputy Director, Research at the Australian Institute of Family Studies. I think the broad summary of our results from the range of different elements of the evaluation, as you probably understand, the different methodologies, as previous officers have talked to you about, evaluations kind of need to be brought together to understand the full picture. I think that in terms of the views, particularly of professionals about the safety of children afterwards, allows us to claim that I think we have greater emphasis, if you like, in terms of addressing that issue of meaningful relationships that a very large number of professionals agreed, almost all professionals, 97% in fact, agreed that meaningful relationship with both parents after separation was being achieved through the changes. But I think it's a different situation in terms of the other proposition, whether the family law system places adequate priority on protecting children from harm, and there was a lower number, so 69% agreed to that. But of course that's only one element of the overall evaluation.
Okay, so just specifically on that particular section, Chapter 6 talks about the operation of that aspect of the legislative change, and as you've said, it has the majority of professionals acknowledge that it's played an important role, but my understanding, and I was seeking your additional input on this, is that the professionals' views were that the findings on parenting arrangements from both the court file study and the analysis of published judgments showed that it had a limited effect in practice and that divergent interpretations were evident in the published judgments. Can you tell us why that might be?
I think what it's reflecting is that there's a lot of complexity to a program of legislative change. First of all, it can take quite a while for it to take effect, and one of the things that our evaluation pointed out was that some of those implications were slower to be realised than one might have hoped. And for one example of that was quite common throughout the evaluation was the issue of screening and of being able to identify safety concerns, that there was variability in the degree to which professionals were taking that up. And so that's not an issue of legislation, it's rather an issue of practice and implementation, and so can go to issues, for example, around the extent and the effectiveness of training and of professional development. And I would also add the issue of the culture that supports and understands that. And I'm not talking there just about courts, I'm talking about right throughout the family law system.
So I agree that it's clearly an issue of practice and implementation. Is it not also an issue of funding, given that there needs to be appropriate funds to undertake that training?
That wasn't part of our evaluation. That's a question for
analysis
government.
Of that. Okay. So given that you said the changes are washing through a bit more slowly, do you anticipate that we will see further changes in the coming years? Do you expect that those figures will increase?
That's not something that our evaluation addressed, but I think that from our broader understanding of how we see progressive legislation changes taking effect, and certainly the Institute was involved with evaluations of the previous set of changes in 2006, which were a very major change and put greater emphasis on the issue of shared parental responsibility.
As opposed to the safety of the child,
yes, so these things do take time. So one would expect that would be occurring. And certainly we're about to publish our next edition of Family Matters, which is our peer-reviewed journal, and certainly there's some reflection and commentary on those things that exactly go to your point, that there are progressive changes and greater use and awareness of things like screening tools in relation to safety, particularly of children, but of adults as well.
Okay. All right, I'll keep an eye out for that forthcoming publication.
Can I just add, we're also about to commence a new piece of work specifically looking at the experience of children whose families go through the family law system.
Okay.
And that will also, it really will fill a much needed gap in information about the experience of children.
Just in brief, what's the timeframe on that?
Good question. I think it's over the next year. So we're about to commence collecting the data. We're consulting with stakeholders now, and my understanding is that it's towards the end of next year.
That you'll hope to publish?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, indeed.
great.
It'll be a report to the Attorney General's Department who commissioned the report.
Beg your pardon?
It'll be a report to the Attorney General's Department who commissioned the research.
Okay, that's good to know. Could you provide me some more information about that on notice rather than at the moment today? Thank you. Just back to the synthesis evaluation, it found that there was a weak association between the repeal of the so-called friendly parent criterion and an effect that was consistent with the intention of that repeal, so a weak correlation there. Can you tell us why you think that might be? Did the evidence give any indication of why?
Well, I think... Did you want me to go? I think that it's a very difficult issue to try and evaluate something like that, because ideally you actually want to be able to look at change that might be affecting half of a population and see whether something as complex as that is bringing about change. And so that's simply not possible. So you have to try and attribute something you might be observing to an element such as a change to the legislation. So that's why the language that was used was of that nature.
Okay, so it's not really clear why there's only been that weak association between disclosures of family violence, even though that friendly parent criterion's been repealed.
I think
is it that people don't know, or?
Well, I think as our report highlights, that there's so many elements of the system that go into why someone might make a disclosure or not make a disclosure. Certainly there's lots of evidence from the many elements of the evaluation that point to professionals not necessarily even asking the question, and other constraints on people disclosing violence and concerns that they might have about themselves or their children.
Okay, so it's hard to pinpoint a particular
That's
purpose,
right.
I understand. What do you think are the pathways to changing that and to increasing people's comfort and willingness to disclose?
Well, we certainly commented on the need for more training for all the professionals working in all parts of the family law system, and also improvements for screening of violence and child abuse concerns.
Okay.
Add to that as well. In other research that wasn't part of this particular evaluation, we've also evaluated innovative models such as coordinated dispute resolution models that actually but those are expensive and complicated, and really what they show is that when you actually have more integrated systems of professionals working together across those boundaries, so mediators and family lawyers, etc., outside of courts, that they can work, but that's a very expensive investment.
Yes. And again, would be predicated on good training for all of those professionals, which is
Absolutely.
one of the other issues with the family court.
Point is it's the integration of the child protection system with the family law system, and there's certainly been some efforts in some jurisdictions to co-locate across those two systems, which, as you would know, one is federal and one is state-based.
Yes, adding to that complexity. I can see the Chair looking at me. May I have about 4 more minutes, please, Chair? Thank you. And my last question about the evaluation was that it found that close to 3 in 10 parents reported never being asked about family violence, and you flagged that and talked about the need for better screening procedures. Are there any other mechanisms that we could use to improve those reporting figures? So you've said the screening, the coordinated dispute resolution models. Anything else?
Well, the training of the professionals goes to that, because for them to know to ask, but to also to know how to ask in a way that really facilitates disclosure.
Okay. And so
and I
is
think
there that training happening, or would that require additional funding to occur?
That's not really a question
Yes,
for us.
I don't know that we
The
can
research
comment on
didn't
that.
go to that.
No.
Okay.
Can I
all right,
just
I'll
add,
take
though,
that up.
in addition to training, I think what's important to recognise is the broader culture and context of the service systems within which this is operating. And so it's not just simply about the knowledge of an individual worker, it's about creating awareness, and that's broad community awareness. And obviously there's lots of strategies that are happening at the Commonwealth and state level in order to try and bring about that. That is as much a part of addressing the system as is the individual knowledge and actions of actors within elements of the system.
Yes.
Both are really important, bringing culture change.
It's a big job. Have you had much engagement with Women's Legal Service on their Safety First in Family Law 5-point plan? Does that ring any bells?
No. Go.
It was
Well,
launched
we
in June this year.
They're an important stakeholder, and we're obviously an important part of the evaluation, but I'm not aware of any direct involvement on that particular issue.
Oh, okay. So you haven't had a look at that plan?
Not in relation to this evaluation.
Oh, okay. And in relation generally to your work more broadly?
Oh, well, we certainly engage with stakeholders in the sector.
Okay. So
That's
do you
the
have a view on the recommendations in that plan?
We can come back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. Take that on notice. And can you, if to the extent of your ability and your expertise, can you talk us through briefly, with the time, what you think needs to change in our family law system to ensure that both survivors of DV and their children are kept safe?
Well, I think all we can do is really go back to what the evaluation, the findings from the evaluation, which pointed to the need for better integration across child protection and family law, better training and education for the professionals, better screening. All of those things would make a difference.
Okay. And Minister, perhaps if I could finish with the question to you, take it on notice if you need to. Does the government have a position in relation to that Women's Legal Service Safety and Family Law First, Safety First in Family Law plan?
I'll take that on notice.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for your time, folks. Thank you.